The story of ketchup is a lot more surprising than most people think. It's not just a red sauce that goes on fries. Its past is rich and strange, full of twists and turns. We often wonder about the things we eat every day. Where did they come from? How did they become what they are? For ketchup, the path was long, and for a short time, it really did involve medicine. But to understand that part, we first need to go way back, long before tomatoes were even in the picture. The unexpected beginnings, ketchup before tomatoes. It might sound crazy, but ketchup did not always have tomatoes. In fact, for a long time, it had no tomatoes at all. This might be the most surprising thing about it. The original ketchup started in Asia. It was a fermented fish sauce. This was a long, long time ago, maybe in the 17th century. The name itself gives us a clue. Ketchup or ko-chiap are words from a Chinese dialect. They mean something like brine of fish or sauce. Think about it like modern fish sauce or soy sauce. And it was a savory, salty liquid. It was made by fermenting fish, sometimes with soybeans, spices, and other things. This process brought out a deep, rich flavor. We now call this flavor umami. People in China, Vietnam, and other Southeast Asian countries use this sauce a lot. It was a staple. It added a lot of taste to their food. It also helped preserve food. European traders found this sauce. British sailors and merchants traveled a lot in the 17th and 18th centuries. They went to places like Malaysia and Singapore. There they discovered ketchup. They liked it. It was new and exciting. It had a strong flavor that was different from anything they had back home. So they brought it back to Europe. Once it got to Europe, people started trying to make their own versions. But they didn't have the same ingredients. They didn't have the exact fish or fermentation method. So they improvised. This is where ketchup started to change a lot. The European versions became very diverse. People began making ketchups from all sorts of things. You could find ketchup made from mushrooms. These were dark, earthy, and savory. They were often used to flavor gravies and stews. There were walnut ketchups. These were also dark and nutty. They added a unique depth to dishes. Some ketchups used oysters or anchovies. These kept the fishy, salty origin alive. But they were different from the Asian fish sauce. Other ingredients commonly used included shallots, garlic, and many spices. Think about mace, nutmeg, cloves, ginger, pepper. And of course, vinegar was a key part. Vinegar helped preserve the ketchup. It also added a sharp, tangy taste. These early European ketchups were not sweet. They were purely savory. They were made to perk up bland food. They were also used as a kind of seasoning base. You could add them to meat, fish, or vegetables. They made things taste better. These early ketchups were a way to add complex flavors to cooking. They were also a way to preserve ingredients. Before refrigerators, people needed ways to make food last. Fermenting, pickling, and making savory sauces were all important. Ketchup was one of these solutions. So, for over a century, ketchup was a dark, savory, often spicy liquid. It could be made from almost anything that could be fermented or pickled. Fish, mushrooms, walnuts, oysters, the list was long. What's missing from all of this? Tomatoes. Not a single tomato. This fact is important because it shows how much ketchup has changed. It also shows how flexible the idea of ketchup was. It was a general term for a strong, flavorful sauce. This flexibility would later allow the tomato to step in and completely take over. Now we need to talk about the tomato. It's hard to imagine ketchup without it today. But for a long, long time, people were scared of tomatoes. They thought tomatoes were poisonous. This sounds strange to us now. We eat tomatoes all the time. But in Europe and America, the tomato had a bad reputation. Our tomatoes are part of the nightshade family. This family includes some very poisonous plants, like belladonna. People saw the similarities. They saw the bright red fruit. They thought, this looks too good to be true. It must be deadly. And sometimes the leaves and stems of tomato plants are toxic. People in upper classes also ate off pewter plates. Pewter has lead in it. The acidity of tomatoes could leach lead from the plates. This made people sick. They blamed the tomato, not the plate. So, for centuries, tomatoes were mostly grown as ornamental plants. People thought they were pretty. They grew them in gardens, but they didn't eat them. They were called love apples and other exotic names, but they were not food. This was especially true in Northern Europe and America. In Southern Europe, like Italy, people were less afraid. They started eating tomatoes earlier. They used them in sauces and dishes, but even there, it took a while for tomatoes to become truly popular. The perception of tomatoes slowly started to change in the early 19th century. Brave people began to eat them publicly. One story often told is about Colonel Robert Gibbon Johnson. In 1820, he supposedly ate a basket of tomatoes in front of a crowd in Salem, New Jersey. People expected him to drop dead. He didn't. This story might be partly legend, but it shows the general feeling at the time. People were surprised when others ate tomatoes and lived. As more people tried them, they realized tomatoes were not poisonous. They were actually quite delicious. People started to appreciate their sweet, tangy flavor. They saw their culinary potential. Tomatoes became more common in gardens. Farmers started growing them for food, not just for show. So, how did tomatoes get into ketchup? It was a natural fit. People were already making all sorts of ketchups with other ingredients, as we discussed. They were looking for strong, savory flavors that could be preserved. The tomato, with its intense flavor and acidity, was perfect. Early tomato ketchup recipes began appearing in cookbooks in the early 1800s. One of the first was by James Meese in 1812. He called tomatoes love apples and suggested using them in a sauce. These early recipes were for home cooks. They were not for big factories. People made ketchup in their kitchens. These homemade tomato ketchups were quite different from what we buy today. They were more like a thick, savory tomato paste or a heavily spiced tomato sauce. They often contained spices like mace, nutmeg, cloves, and ginger. Onions, garlic, and plenty of vinegar were also common. Sugar was sometimes used, but not as much as in modern ketchup. The main goal was to capture the flavor of fresh tomatoes and preserve it. Now, preservation was still very important. Tomatoes are seasonal. You can only grow them in summer. Before refrigeration, people needed ways to enjoy tomatoes all year round. Drying them, canning them, and making them into sauces like ketchup were all methods. Ketchup was a good way to use up a lot of ripe tomatoes at once. It turned them into something that could last through the winter. The idea that tomatoes were good for you also started to spread. Once people got over the poison fear, they swung the other way. They started to think tomatoes had health benefits. This paved the way for the next very surprising chapter in ketchup's history. It laid the groundwork for ketchup to be sold as a medicine. The tomato went from being seen as a dangerous fruit to a healthy one. This quick shift in public opinion was key. It was a perfect storm for someone to market it as a cure-all. And someone did. The medicinal moment, Dr. Miles, and the tomato pills. This is where the story gets really interesting. It's the core of the question was ketchup originally sold as medicine, and the answer is a qualified yes. Tomato ketchup, or at least tomato extracts, were marketed with medicinal claims. This happened in the United States in the 1830s. The key figure in this story is Dr. John Cook Bennett. He was a physician. He was also a professor. In the late 1830s, Dr. Bennett became a big promoter of tomatoes for health. He claimed that tomatoes had amazing healing powers. He said they could cure all sorts of ailments. Things like indigestion, diarrhea, and even jaundice. He called tomatoes a universal medicine. Dr. Bennett didn't just talk about it. He went further. He created and sold tomato pills. These pills were supposed to be concentrated tomato pulp. Sometimes they had added laxatives or other ingredients. He even published a recipe for tomato ketchup in a medical journal. He promoted this ketchup as having medicinal benefits. He said it was good for you. To understand this, you have to remember what 19th century medicine was like. It was very different from today. Science was still developing. Doctors often based their treatments on observation. They used theories that might not hold up today. People were desperate for cures. They often turned to natural remedies. They believed that plants and foods held medicinal properties. And sometimes they were right, but often they were not. The general belief was that fresh fruits and vegetables were good for health. This wasn't wrong, but the specific claims for tomatoes were highly exaggerated. Tomatoes were still somewhat new in their widespread acceptance as food. This made them exciting. They were seen as exotic. This made them ripe for grand claims. Dr. Bennett was not alone. Other doctors and entrepreneurs quickly jumped on the bandwagon. They saw an opportunity. They also started making and selling tomato pills and other remedies. These products promised to cure everything from dyspepsia, indigestion, to liver complaints. The market was flooded with these tomato cures. People bought them. There was a lot of publicity. Newspapers and almanacs promoted the benefits of tomatoes. The public was eager for anything that promised good health. They were tired of harsh 19th century treatments like bloodletting or mercury. A simple, natural remedy like the tomato seemed appealing. But there was a problem. The claims were often false. The tomato pills didn't really work as advertised for serious diseases. Some pills were pure fraud. They might contain very little actual tomato, or they might have harmful fillers. Even if they were pure tomato, a tomato isn't a miracle cure for everything. The craze for tomato-based medicine didn't last long. By the 1850s, people started to realize they had been duped. The tomato pill remedies were largely ineffective. The promises of miracle cures didn't come true. The public lost faith in them. Many of the entrepreneurs who made these pills were exposed as charlatans. Dr. Bennett himself had a controversial career. He was involved in some scandals, not just with tomato pills. So, while ketchup itself wasn't directly sold as a bottle of medicine in the way a cough syrup is, its key ingredient, the tomato point 2, was certainly packaged and promoted with very strong medicinal claims. These claims influenced public perception. They helped cement the idea that tomatoes were good for health. This medicinal moment for the tomato was brief, but it's a fascinating part of ketchup's history. It shows how food and perceived health benefits can intertwine. It also reminds us to be careful about miracle cures. The short-lived medicinal craze for tomatoes faded away. By the 1850s, most people knew that tomato pills were not miracle cures. The market for them dried up. People stopped trusting the exaggerated health claims. The era of tomato as a patent medicine was over, but the culinary popularity of tomato ketchup kept growing. People still loved the taste. Homemade tomato ketchup was becoming a common item in American kitchens. It was tasty, it was versatile, it went well with many foods. This growing demand set the stage for commercial production. Making ketchup at home was a lot of work. It involved peeling, chopping, cooking, and bottling. People wanted convenience, so companies started making ketchup to sell. This was the beginning of ketchup as a mass-produced product. Early commercial ketchups faced big challenges. The biggest challenge was spoilage. Tomatoes go bad quickly. Before modern preservation methods, keeping ketchup fresh was hard. Many early commercial ketchups were not very good. They often spoiled, they could ferment in the bottle. This was a common problem. To prevent spoilage, some manufacturers used questionable methods. They sometimes used too much acid or too many spices. They might use low-quality tomatoes. Some even added harmful preservatives like coal tar dyes or benzoate of soda in unsafe amounts. The taste could be inconsistent. The quality was often poor. People were wary of store-bought ketchup because of these issues. This is where Henry J. Heinz comes into the story. He was a key figure in changing ketchup for the better. Heinz and his company played a massive role in making ketchup safe, popular, and a household name. He understood the problems with early commercial ketchups. He wanted to make a high-quality product. In the late 19th century, Heinz developed a new recipe. His recipe used ripe red tomatoes. He believed in using the best ingredients, but more importantly, he used more vinegar and more sugar than many other brands. These two ingredients acted as natural preservatives. The high acidity of the vinegar combined with the sugar made it very difficult for bacteria to grow. This meant Heinz ketchup stayed fresh longer without needing harmful additives. Heinz also focused heavily on hygiene. He was a pioneer in food safety. His factories were clean. He insisted on strict quality control. He used clear glass bottles so consumers could see the product inside. This was a bold move at a time when many food products were hidden in opaque containers because they looked unappetizing. Heinz wanted people to see the purity of his ketchup. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 in the United States also helped ketchup quality. This law was passed to stop the sale of adulterated or misbranded food and drugs. It forced manufacturers to list ingredients and avoid harmful substances. Heinz was already ahead of his time in advocating for pure food. This law helped raise standards across the industry. Because of these efforts, Heinz ketchup became a trusted product. It was reliably good, it was safe, it tasted consistent, the focus shifted away from any medicinal claims. Now, the emphasis was entirely on taste, convenience, and quality. Ketchup became a staple condiment. It was no longer a dubious medicine. It was a delicious addition to meals. The process of making ketchup became industrialized. Large factories could process tons of tomatoes. They could produce huge quantities of ketchup. This made it affordable and widely available. Ketchup started appearing on dining tables across America. It was ready to become the global icon we know today. This transformation from a questionable health tonic to a culinary essential was a huge step. It showed how a product can evolve dramatically based on public perception, scientific understanding, and manufacturing innovations. It's ketchup today, a culinary icon. Now, let's look at ketchup today. Its journey has been incredible. It started as a mysterious fermented fish sauce from Asia. Then it became a diverse, savory condiment in Europe. After that, it had a brief odd detour as a supposed medicine in America, and finally it turned into the global culinary icon we all recognize. Today, ketchup is everywhere. It's a universal food item. You can find a bottle of ketchup in almost every home kitchen. It's on tables in diners, fast food restaurants, and even some fancy eateries. It is one of the most popular condiments in the world. Think about how we use it. Ketchup is the classic companion for French fries. It's essential for burgers and hot dogs. Many people put it on their eggs, their scrambled eggs especially. Some even use it on steak. It's used as a dip, a topping, or an ingredient in cooking. Its versatility is part of its appeal. What makes modern ketchup so appealing? It's a carefully balanced mix of flavors. It hits all the right notes. It's sweet from the sugar, it's sour from the vinegar. It's savory, or umami, from the ripe tomatoes. And often, it has a little bit of spice from onion, garlic, or other seasonings. This combination of tastes makes it very satisfying. Its thick, smooth texture and bright red color are also iconic. We recognize it instantly. It's important to remember that while ketchup is no longer sold as medicine, the tomato itself is a healthy fruit. Our tomatoes are packed with vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, especially lycopene. Lycopene is a powerful antioxidant that gives tomatoes their red color. It's known for its health benefits. However, modern ketchup, while made from tomatoes, is primarily a condiment. It usually contains a good amount of sugar and salt. So, it's not a health food in itself. It's meant to add flavor to other foods, usually in small portions. Eating too much ketchup means consuming a lot of added sugar and sodium. It's a treat, a flavor enhancer, not a health drink. The evolution of ketchup is a perfect example of how food, culture, and science intertwine. When it shows how a basic idea can change and adapt over centuries, it crossed continents. It changed its main ingredients completely. It went through periods of being feared, praised, and even marketed as a cure. From a simple desire to preserve food and add flavor, ketchup transformed. It went from a niche, homemade item to a powerful industrialized product. It became a symbol of convenience and good taste, especially in American culture. Its story is far more complex and interesting than just being a simple sauce. It reminds us that even the most common items on our dinner table often have a surprisingly rich and layered past. It's a testament to human innovation and changing tastes, a true culinary journey through time.